This is Amy, and you're listening to the Talkin' Appalachian podcast.
What a miracle to be here at all. Here we are in the same stretch of time.
That's The Waiting by Tiffany Williams from her album, All Those Days of Drinking Dust. You can find her music on Spotify, and be sure to check the show notes for links. Welcome back to part 2 of the Barbara Kingsolver episodes. In this episode, Barbara is speaking to a community gathering at UVA-Wise where I teach, and I had the honor of introducing her, but since that's not included in this recording, I'll just briefly recap because the longer intro is in part 1. Be sure and listen to that one if you haven't already. Kingsolver is a native of Eastern Kentucky and the author of Demon Copperhead, set in my home county of Lee in Central Appalachian, Virginia, which is a big reason why was so important to me to do this particular podcast. Now, she's written 17 more books, and Demon Copperhead was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. She trained as a scientist, but secretly wrote fiction and poetry until she decided to be a full-time writer. In this episode, you'll hear her read from Demon Copperhead, talk about her writing process and the research she did for the book. She's going to talk about the nonprofit she's creating for women in recovery, how she adapted the book from Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, what she's reading now. We're going to cover so much in this episode. So without further ado, here's Barbara Kingsolver.
Well, I spent 3 years writing Demon Copperhead, and I have spent nearly 2 years talking about Demon Copperhead. The kid will not move out of the house, and that's unusual. I mean, a writer writes, We are only ourselves really when we're writing. That's how I feel. The world asks many other things of writers, go on a book tour when the book is launched, talk to the media, talk to, newspapers, and talk to the TV, and discuss your book with people, and go on Oprah, and, it's good for me, okay? I spend my life alone in a room. Well, I do have a family, and that's really nice, but I spend my working life alone in a room, and I love being alone in a room. I'm an extreme introvert. They don't make people more introverted than me. That's really true. So I'm really happy by myself, writing day after day. When the day comes that the book is launched, that word is very real, launched, because I feel like I get shot out of a cannon, kaboom, into the world, and doing the book tour, usually for about a couple of months, where you, as an author, you fly around from city to city, a different place every day, and you're talking to audiences, and it's the hardest part of my job, to be honest, to just be with people so much. But it's also, when it's done, something I'm so glad to have done. It's so good for me to go out in the world. And in this case, I do mean the world, because I did a U.S. book tour, and then another U.S. book tour, and then the U.K. book tour, and then Germany and Poland and Spain. People all over the world really want to talk about this book, and that's an amazing thing for Appalachia, for kids like Demon. And what I bring home from all that is that I'm not really alone in my room. Y'all are there with me. And by y'all, I mean a big y'all, that this is a huge conversation that I'm having. And that's a really good thing for me to remember, to bring back to my work the next time. So this is a long way of saying I've been talking about Demon for month after month after month. I'm really itching to get back to work and write the next book, because for a writer, the most important book is always the next one, the one you're thinking about writing next. This is the last Demon event, and I could not be happier to be bringing Demon home, because I wrote this book for us, ultimately for us. I've spent my whole life feeling the misrepresentation of my home, feeling the the condescension, or just the invisibility, all the different ways that people don't really understand Appalachia, don't put our problems in a context, don't understand what institutional poverty really is, don't understand classism. All these things that I wanted to write about were meant to be a window so that people from outside this region could look in and see us as I believe we are, and some of the wonderful things about us, not just the difficult things. But I also wrote it so that we could see ourselves. And for me as a kid, when I think about myself growing up in Carlisle, Kentucky, in a little high school where almost nobody was going to college, I could not imagine reading a book set in my county. A book, a novel, an important novel written about people like me. That would have blown the top off of my head. That would have been so amazing. I have always loved to write and to read, but I never once in my childhood said, I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. I never dreamed that because I didn't think ordinary people like us could do such a big thing as that. I didn't think I could be a writer. So I am so glad to bring this book back to, well, right next to Lee County, so close to this part of Southwest Virginia that I love so much. And I'll talk to you a little bit about, I've already told you some about why I wrote the book. And I will read you just a little piece of the book, like 1 minute, so you can kind of hear the voice of the book and this kid, Demon Copperhead, who's my version of David Copperfield, who tells the story. And then I'm going to talk to you about why I set the book in Lee County, why that was a very deliberate choice. I'll read you just a little tiny bit of the book, the opening, because I don't have to explain anything. Nothing's happened yet. First, I got myself born. A decent crowd was on hand to watch, and they've always given me that much. The worst of the job was up to me, my mother being, let's just say, out of it. On any other day, they'd have seen her outside on the deck of her trailer home, good neighbors taking notice, pestering the tit of trouble as they will. All through the dog breath air of late summer and fall, cast an eye up the mountain, and there she'd be, little bleach blonde, smoking her Pall Malls, hanging on that railing like she's the captain of her ship up there, and now might be the hour it's going down. This is an 18-year-old girl we're discussing, all on her own and as pregnant as it gets. The day she failed to show, it fell to Nance Paget to go bang on the door, barge inside, and find her passed out on the bathroom floor with her junk all over the place and me already coming out. A slick, fish-colored hostage picking up grit from the vinyl tile, worming and shoving around because I'm still inside the sack that babies float in pre-real life. Mr. Paget was outside, idling his truck, headed for evening service, probably thinking about how much of his life he'd spent waiting on women. His wife would have told him the Jesusing could hold on a minute. First, she needed to go see if the little pregnant gal had got herself liquored up again. Mrs. Paget, being a lady that doesn't beat around the bushes, and if need be, will tell Christ Jesus to sit tight and keep his pretty hair on. She came back out yelling for him to call 911 because a poor child is in the bathroom trying to punch himself out of a bag. Like a little blue prize fighter. Those are the words she'd use later on, being not at all shy to discuss the worst day of my mom's life. And if that's how I came across to the first people to lay eyes on me, I'll take it. To me, that says I had a fighting chance. Long odds, yes, I know. If a mother is lying in her own piss and pill bottles while they're slapping the kid she's shunted out, telling him to look alive, likely the bastard is doomed. Kid born to the junkie is a junkie. He'll grow up to be everything you don't want to know. The rotten teeth and dead zone eyes, the nuisance of locking up your tools in the garage so they don't walk off, the rent by the week motel squatting well back from the scenic highway. This kid, if he wanted a shot at the finer things, should have got himself delivered to some rich or smart or Christian non-using type of mother. Anybody will tell you the born of this world are marked from the get-out, win or lose. Me, though, I was a born sucker for the superhero rescue. Did that line of work even exist in our trailer home universe? Had they all quit Smallville and gone looking for bigger action? Save or be saved? These are questions. You want to think it's not over till the last page, and it is not.
Will you come be by my side? I love you like the mountains love the warm sunrise. I love you. Is that alright? Our time here.
This end of the end of the state that someone earlier today told me that a journalist had described as whatever the hell is west of Roanoke. Can you even believe that? Yes, you can, because you've heard it before. We've all heard it before. And here's the thing. I think that probably a good half of Virginia is west of Roanoke. It's a lot, like 200 miles of it. So there's all that. And then there is Wise and Scott and Lee. And I love this territory. I live in Washington County, not in Abingdon, but in the country. And my family is still mostly in Kentucky. So the way I go home, the way I travel back and forth is through, the long tail of Lee County, of Virginia, that beautiful line of cliffs. You know what I'm talking about, the white cliffs that run all the way down the border between Kentucky and Virginia, and the that park where they have the bison. My kids were when they were little, they couldn't wait till we saw the bison, and the sand cave, and the bluegrass, the Cumberland Park, and then you go through the tunnel and Cumberland Gap, and you're in Kentucky. So I've driven that road so many times. It feels so familiar to me, and because it is so rural, because there are very few cities. Well, there are very few cities in Appalachia in general, but it's a big, beautiful stretch of country that people don't talk about. I mean, we do, you do, but in the bigger world, when I decided I wanted to try to write my great Appalachian novel, which is a big and scary task, and I thought about where I wanted to set it, and I thought about where I wanted to start it, kind of what is the starting point of this story, which is really, it's a story of, it's a history. It's a history of a people who have been exploited from the outside again and again by companies that wanted to come in and take something and leave a mess behind. Take the timber, take the coal, take the tobacco, and ultimately with the opioid epidemic, with opioids, the Purdue Pharma harvested what was left, which was our pain, and left a mess behind. I wanted to look deeply into that through a story that wouldn't be telling you the history, but showing you the history and how we have amazingly not just survived all that, but have created a culture of resilience, of resourcefulness. When people are deprived, they learn to make things themselves. We're a culture of makers. We make quilts and music on front porches, and we make casseroles and pies for our neighbors, and we make babies, and we make community. That's the main thing, is that we are a people made of community. All these good things about us, I think, are kind of the consequence of this history that we've lived through. So I knew that Lee County was the epicenter of this last exploitation, the beginning of the opioid epidemic, and that it was very deliberately chosen by Purdue Pharma. They looked at data, they looked at metrics from all over the country, and they chose 3 places where they saw a vulnerability, where they could pump in their painkiller and make a fortune and make a killing, and killing is what they did. And every family I know has been touched by that criminal damage, and we're still living with it. And the kids are still living with it. The orphans of the epidemic are living with it. So I wanted to start the story there. And so Lee County seemed like a place that was somehow a microcosm of this bigger story. And also because I love it so much. And there are places that are so special to me, like the Sand Cave, like the Devil's Bathtub, which is in Scott County. It's a really special place. Don't go when it's flooded, and leave your firearms in the car. So I thought that it would be worth telling you that it was, for me, a labor of love, and also my hope that, and I, spent, even though I was familiar, with the territory, I still spent time. I came and I watched football games, and I experienced the generals, and I spoke with many people. Actually, when we drove through town, I got this feeling when we passed the library, and I realized the Wise County Library, there's a little room in there, a private room, where as part of the research for this book, I spent many hours talking with and mostly listening to people who were in active addiction or mostly in recovery, who just told me their stories, told me how this happened to them, usually starting with a work injury or sports injury and a legal prescription from a doctor that led to their addiction. And just spending hours with people who opened up their lives to me at the end of those very intimate times that I spent listening and feeling so much just anguish and compassion and gratitude to people who shared their stories with me, so that I could make a larger story that would bring a hope, compassion, from a larger world. I often ended those sessions when they were over with just crying in my car. And that's why when we drove, and that the library happened to be a convenient meeting place where I could, talk with people away from their homes, in private. And that's when we drove by, I suddenly felt like sobbing in the car. I had to think about, oh, it's okay. But I'm just so grateful to everyone who helped me understand this story and tell this story in a better way. And it's interesting because I have heard a little bit of pushback, not directly, that's our way. We don't tell people directly, we tell somebody else, so we'll get back to you. From people who didn't appreciate my setting this book in Lee County, and I'm curious about that, and so I have asked why. Well, one thing I've heard is, that those things don't really happen in Lee County. Well, they do. Yes, they do. And I wonder what kind of life you would live to honestly believe that the foster care system of these counties is not desperately overwhelmed, that the medical care delivery system in these counties is not desperately overwhelmed, to believe that opioid use disorder is not touching every family in this region. I don't think you really live in this county if you think that. So, no, I don't accept that. I think I'm going to say, go back and talk to your neighbors. The other thing I just actually very recently learned, which surprised me, is that some people felt that I had outed people. It was I had written about actual people and revealed their secrets. Well, that's news to me. I never, ever put real people in my novels, unless it's like the president or Oprah or, like a public figure. But my characters are complete inventions. And I'll tell you why. That's necessary, because when I write a novel, my starting point is meaning. I figure out what I want this book to mean in the world. What do I want to write about in a larger sense? In this case, it was the story of my place and my people. Sort of, how did we get to where we are? What are our problems and what's good about us? That's what the story will mean. And then I construct a plot so that I'm not going to tell you how to think about these things. I'm going to construct a world and invite you in, and I'm going to tell a story because you need a plot. That's why you keep turning pages. So I will devise a plot that will kind of ask the questions that I want asked and will, lead a reader to form their own opinions and their own answers. Okay, and then step 3 is I cast the movie, okay? I have the story, then I have to figure out who's going to be in the story, who will do these things, who are the characters, who will act out all these roles that I've created. Well, I cannot put my friends and family into those roles because they're not that cooperative. They won't do. I'm the boss. I tell these characters what to do, and they have to do it. Real people won't behave that way. It's just not possible. They don't. I have to start with behavior and then back up to psychology and then back up from there to like a life story. What trauma do they need? What passions or mistakes or what do they have to have lived through to be the person who will do this stuff that I invent? So it's completely, I really work at this. It's a little bit insulting when people say, oh, I know this person and that person. And I think you do not. They were much harder to make. So I completely invent every character that I write about. Naturally, when you recognize real places like Devil's Bathtub or the Sand Cave or the Lehigh Stadium or Coach's house, I never knew who lived in that house, but I knew that the coach in this novel, the football coach, is a very important character in this novel, as he would be in this county, in this place. In these counties. And so he would live in the fanciest house. He would, like, if we had a king and a castle, that would be the coach's house. So every time I drive by that house, I've always been, it's in Jonesville. It's got like it's like the fanciest house, and it's up on the hill, and it's right above Jonesville. You can see it from like Main Street there. And I never knew who really lived in that house. It was not my business, although I took some pictures of it for, when I'm doing research, so I can take them back to my desk so I can like look at a place and think about it. So if they saw me taking pictures, they might have thought that was weird. But, I understand, like, if you see real places, you might think that I'm writing about real people. And that's not just with this novel. Every novel I've written, even though most of them are set in towns whose names I've invented, they're set in imaginary places, but still, people read my books and they say, I know that was my car, that was my red truck, wasn't it? Or that was my cousin, or that was my cow. It wasn't, but fine, claim it. But if people are offended that I'm writing about them or someone they know, I'm sorry, that's on you. That's your problem. But it's an interesting business, making up stories. We are trained, from an early age not to lie. So it's an interesting reversal of the process when you do that for a living. And I guess people who aren't accustomed to, fabrication just have to assume when they read characters that are very convincing to them. I guess it's a reasonable and fair assumption that you must have actually put real people in your novels. So I decided, instead of being offended, to take it as a compliment. Thank you if you think these people are real, even though they're not. But if you think it's you and you're mad about it, sorry. What I hope above all is that what comes through in this book is how much I love this place, how important it is to me to put it on the map as a place of great, with immense respect and love, and how important it is to me that the rest of the world see our value and that we are not invisible, that we are deserving of our beautiful place in the map.
The endless hours sitting close, maybe we won't mind the waiting. Will you wait with me? Will you come be by my side? I love you.
So I've never really talked about all that with any other audience, and that was interesting. Demon, this boy, although he's been more high maintenance than any of my children, but he's been quite a a force in the world, and he has brought home a lot of bacon. This book has sold and sold and sold. I'm luckily a low maintenance person. I don't need a lot to live on. So I am very happy to be able to take profits from this book and put those resources back where they belong. So with the profits from this book, I am working with a group of people to form a nonprofit to create a women's recovery home in Lee County. And I'm working with Dr. Art Van Zee and Sue Ella Kobach and other people you probably know who are very, very familiar with the recovery community and what the needs are, and they've been so helpful. But I'm so glad to be able to, we haven't decided yet, we're looking at different properties, but to purchase a place that will become a home, a recovery home for women in Lee County, and it will grow from there. We'll do whatever we can. There are federal monies available for these things, but they need a place to land. And so that's what I wanted to do. That's what my heart told me to do with the money from this book. And our priority in our mission statement says that we will give priority to women who are working to become sober on their sobriety in order to be connected with their children, because that's what Demon needed. That's what would have helped him the most. I will keep talking to the news, and you'll hear about this in any way that you want to help and get involved will be wonderful. These things work best if they are supported by the community, as you know. What story am I fabricating next? Well, honestly, I haven't had time to work on it because I've been just, talking about this other book. But I had one idea. It's a big idea that's been cooking for a while, and it's not boiling yet. And then I had an idea for another book, which is about a musician. Music is a really big part, has been a huge part of my life that I've never written about. And so I had an idea for a book it's about a musician, but right now it's just a mess. I haven't really, every time I begin a book, it just feels like Rachel can tell you, I've been referring to it as the stupid book. It's just like, I don't know. I never have confidence in the beginning, but the good thing is that I can sit in my office and write a stupid book and nobody's going to know, because it won't come out of there. I write with the door closed. It won't come out of there until I've rewritten it, 150 times and made it into a good book. So right now it's at the stupid stage, but it's getting better. For all my previous audiobooks, the narrator is me. And I love doing that. It's my one acting gig every a few years. When I finish a book, I go into the studio, and I've had these voices in my head talking to me for years, and I finally get to go into the studio and kind of try to channel those voices and get them onto the, I was going to say tape, but it's not tape, whatever it is. Get them into the audiobook. And I love doing that, and I'm really happy that so far my publisher wants me to do that. Not all authors get to record their own audiobooks, but if you do a good job, they let you do it again. It can be embarrassing, you're sitting in the studio, there's this glass, and here's the director watching you, and here's the engineer watching you, these two guys watching you. You have to do this really, really steamy sex scene. And you just look down and you just get right through it. Try to do it all in one take. Normally, it's just really fun, and I love to do it. But then here we are with a book that's a first-person narrative narrated by a boy. I can be a lot of things. I cannot be a teenage boy. Another reason that I do my own audiobooks is I want the accent to be right. I don't want it to be that fake Texas/Alabama thing that passes for Southern, in all movies. Or sometimes it's like the three sisters in this one family all have different Southern accents. It makes me really, really mad. Our speech is not the same as Southern Georgia or Texas. We have the partial Southern vowel shift where we say, I ride my bike, the sky is bright. That's how we talk. We don't say the sky is bright. That doesn't sound right, right? Why do we do that? I don't know. I just know we do it. And there's a way to do it right and a way not to do it right. So you see what I'm talking about. So now if you go to Pikeville, They say Packville. So it's very regionally specific, but my Southwest Virginia characters need to sound right. So I do them. And so when it came time to find the right male voice, I did audition. I mean, I listened, and I chose Charlie Thurston to narrate this book, and I think he did. Now, I won't say I've listened to all 30 hours of it, but I listened to enough of it, and plenty of people have told me that they think he did a wonderful job. And he's not from here, but he got the partial Southern vowel shift right. I mean, of course, literally millions of people have read this book now, and I certainly haven't heard from them all, nor do I necessarily need to. But I hear from a lot of readers in a lot of ways. I get letters. Some people still write letters or emails, or I get a lot of messages on social media. It's very gratifying because I wanted this book, as I sort of implied or even said, I wrote this book so that people outside the region would see us who we really are, not the stereotype that they've believed. See us with the nuance and the complexity that we have. And I wanted it to be a window, and I wanted it to be a mirror. And I have gotten lots of messages and letters from people saying both those things. I've heard from people in urban places who said, "You made me rethink my prejudice. You made me think twice about how I talk about hillbillies, rural people, how I think about them, how I dismiss their voting habits and their living or whatever." So yes, I have heard that. And I have also heard very specifically from people in this, I've heard, I've gotten letters that just make me cry from, for example, kids who grew up in the foster care system who said, "How did you know? I didn't think anybody was watching. I didn't think anybody was paying attention." So to be seen, to feel like you've been seen, that's such a wonderful thing that a novel can do. I know myself, the moments that I cherish reading fiction are those moments where I feel like someone has just reached out and touched me and said, "Me too. Me too. I feel that too." To know we're not alone. I think the fact that the book is being read really widely by people on both sides of this rural-urban divide I take enormous hope from that, because if I could do one good thing in the world right now, it would be to try to encourage conversation across that terrible, terrible divide, that political divide between rural and urban. People who are not talking to each other, who are talking down to each other. No conversation happens without respect. Cannot happen. I don't know, a lot of people think if they just knew everything I knew, they would think the way I do. And so I'll give them all the information they need to be like me. That's not how it works. All humans operate basically the same way. We take information from sources we trust, period. Whether that's our minister or our TV station or our radio station, we have decided we trust this source, and then we let down our guard and we accept the information that comes in, and we share it with other people who trust us. We form trust communities. It's just the human animal. It's just how we work, with very few exceptions. So if you open a conversation with, "You idiot, listen to me," that conversation is over. Nothing will cross there. If we can find a way to respect the circumstances of the people who are different from us, that's how change happens. A lot of my characters in my novels have been women. Why did I go with a boy this time? Well, I have written a lot of women's stories because those are stories that I observe. I like writing about ordinary people who are heroic, because I think there's heroism in many, many lives that isn't celebrated. And I have always been interested in when a speech is happening and the big deals are being made. I'm always interested in, like, who's in the kitchen and what are they doing in there? Those are the stories. We live in a country that celebrates individualism. That is our national religion, for lack of a better term. The solo flyer, the self-made man, the person who, pulled himself up by his bootstraps and made his fortune. And we're meant to believe that anybody in America can be president and that the playing field is all equal and we all have the opportunity to make that, to become whatever we want to be. That is baloney, and it's poisonous because the playing field isn't level. I mean, if you grow up in a place where nobody is even telling you how to take the SAT, you're not going to go to college, okay? I didn't know there was a Yale or a Harvard until I was in my 20s, okay? So, and that's not a terrible thing. It's just fine, but I didn't. If you have survived generations of trauma, you cannot have the confidence to become, what some other person might become. But the poisonous part is because you live in a place with limited opportunities, you live in a family with limited opportunities, and you don't get ahead, and you might be working really hard, but you can't make your rent. If you are poor, you blame yourself. If you believe that story that anybody can make it, then if you're not making it, that little voice in your head says, well, you didn't work hard enough, or you weren't smart enough. You blame yourself. And there's so much, and that's a part of the Appalachian big story that I wanted to address was classism. I think that our country has really made progress in the last decade. Many people, I think, are talking about structural racism, institutional racism, how, for example, like if your great-grandparents weren't allowed in the public pool, because they were black and they didn't learn to swim, they were unlikely to teach their kids to swim because they didn't know how to swim, and that gets handed down. Just things like that get handed down. Discrimination isn't erased at the time that the law changes. It takes a long time for culture to change. Okay, we're talking about that, but we're not talking about institutional classism. We're still pretending that there is no class in this country, and that is poisonous because that poisons our thinking about ourselves when we didn't have the opportunities that could have helped us get ahead. So, and sexism as well. So these stories of the people who I think worked very hard but didn't somehow get the notice or the accolades or even have the self-confidence that they could have had. I like to tell those stories, and those are often female stories, and those are stories that I feel I can authentically tell. I've been a woman for just like my entire life. Well, except when I was a little girl. But occasionally, I feel a character who's male. I have one of my previous novels, The Lacuna, is narrated by a man. He's a gay man, and I just knew his heart. And he's many things besides a man, as everyone is. He's a writer who's afraid to put himself on the page. There are a lot of things about him that I felt like I knew really well, and so I felt like I could write his story. Likewise, this time, it was all wrapped up with Charles Dickens when I decided to model my story quite directly on David Copperfield. I knew that my narrator, that's what Dickens told me, let the kid tell the story. And I decided to let his kid tell the story. I would write my David Copperfield. And so it just seemed like he's going to be a boy. It's just how it occurred to me. And I knew right from the beginning several things. The night that he first appeared in my mind, my David Copperfield, he had red hair. He would be called Copperhead. That would be his nickname. I like the double meaning there. I love words with several meanings, talking about something dangerous, but we're also talking about his penny-colored hair. And I knew from the beginning he would be Melungeon because that's so interesting. Melungeons are because we're here. This is like the birthplace of Melungeons, Scott and Lee and Wise counties. So I thought, that's interesting because it's very Appalachian, and it's a subtle way of telling people we are not a monoculture here. We are many kinds of people. We are ethnically very interesting. One of the things I really love about casting him as a Melungeon is that it was a plus. There is no stigma. As I understand it, as I've always understand it, I have Melungeon people in my family, in-laws and stuff. There's no stigma. People don't look down on you for being a Melungeon in the modern era. And I thought that's a really cool thing to put on the page for people to know that this interesting history of racially mixed people. So I knew these various things about him. And it wasn't until I got deeper into it and thought more about his foot, how he would finally kind of find himself and feel sort of find a source of pride and accomplishment on the football field, which is also very Southwest Virginian. That's a way that boys can distinguish themselves and, sort of become a source of local pride. So he's a football player. He's big. That's just, by the luck of his genetics, he grows. When he finally lives in a place where he's getting fed, he gets tall, he gets broad-shouldered, he's big, he can play football. Well, I don't want to give it away for the three of you who haven't read the book. Disaster happens, he gets hurt. And this would lead to other things that were hard for him. But something that I really came to understand in the writing of this book is this is another part of the Appalachian story, how men's bodies have been used. I think that one of the things that I really, when I look back on my life, and I still see it, the culture of education, I think, was suppressed in our region by, companies that really controlled a lot of things, including the quality of the schools, treating us very much like an internal colony of the United States, not so different from the European countries that were extracting minerals from African countries and kept those people from getting educated, just basically treated them as a captive labor force. I mean, that's a very extreme version, but it was kind of the same thing, that education was not encouraged in these places where you didn't need a lot of book learning to be a coal miner, and it was a good union job and you could get a good pay. And so the culture really was sort of discouraged boys from being bookish. Just think about it. It wasn't that great for girls either, but I know boys, especially that I grew up with, would not talk about books. Even if they were bookish, they would kind of hide that sense that you're valued for your body and for the physical work you can do. That is not a favor. And it is, in the long run, can be very damaging, especially, with the football culture. These high school kids, they're children. They're not done growing yet. And this pressure that's put on them to get back in the game when they're hurt. This is a part of our history. I think it's part of what's been handed down to us. And I think it's interesting that girls from this region are getting educated. We're seeing more girls go on to college than boys. I think that it's kind of a systemic inheritance of this culture of, boys just, we just need brute force from you. That's all. We don't need anything in your brain. So this all these subtleties kind of developed, and I just felt more and more compassion for this teenage boy the more I got to know him and the more I wrote about him. And I thought, this too needs to be explored. So it was, so that was good. I learned a lot. Do any of my past characters visit me? Sometimes we play this game in my family where we try to create a situation where like one character from every book like meets up. Like Eddie Bondo and Rachel from the Equatorio Hotel, it's kind of, in actual fact, when I finish a book, I'm finished. People will write me often to say, please write a sequel, or what happened to Cody and Lloyd? What happened to Deanna Wolf? And my answer is, you get to decide. They're yours now. And I absolutely mean that. I give them to you, and for every reader it's going to be a different answer. But if you want to know the next chapter, just dream it. It's fine. I'm really finished. I don't ever want to write the same book twice. That's not interesting to me. What keeps me excited and going back to my desk is the sheer terror of thinking, I'm trying to do something I've never done before, and I will probably flop on my face, but nobody will know until I've gotten up and tried again and tried again. Just that thrill of risk on the page, of trying to create something that I've never done before, and ideally that nobody's ever done before. And with each book, it's a new challenge. It's a new craft challenge. Like this book was the craft challenge of really doing a very direct adaptation of a classic that people already, know and love. That was a really hard thing to do. I didn't know if I could do it until I did it. In other books, like The Lacuna, the book that I mentioned before, I set the challenge because of the particular psychology of this character, told as a first-person narrative, but the narrator never uses the personal pronoun. He never says, I did this. That's a really tricky thing to do, to tell a first-person story without using first-person pronouns until the moment that it happens is a very important moment in his development because of what has happened and what he has done. And he's allowed to claim himself, his whole self, and put the first person pronoun on the page. So, that's a really particular thing. Why did I do that? I had my reasons. Was it really hard? Yes. Did I screw up? Yes. The first several drafts were stupid. But you would never know unless I told you. The most important thing you do as a writer in the long run is throw a lot of stuff away. It does, I have spared you. The first completely finished draft of Demon Copperhead was 740 pages long. With every rewrite, I set, among other things, a very specific goal of taking out 10% of the page count, and then 10% again, and 10% again, until it got down to whatever it is now, 500 and something pages. You're welcome. Okay, I did that for you. And also for me. I wanted it to be the best book I could, and by taking out, and I didn't do that by saying, I'll ditch chapter 50. No, whole chunks came out. It's just sentence by sentence, scene by scene. I don't really need any adverbs ever, almost ever. If there are two adjectives, take out one, leave the best one. If there are two images in one paragraph, choose the best one, take the other one out. I just put them all in the compost pile. They'll turn into something else. But that's part of the process, is just because with everything that comes out, what remains is better and tighter and stronger, so that tightness of the prose can sustain, I hope, your interest for the space of 500 pages, because that's a big ask. It's a long book, but hopefully it doesn't feel long when you're reading it. You keep wanting to turn the pages. So that's all just craft stuff. That's just my job. The Pulitzer Prize, does that change? Does that increase pressure on the next book? Or do I just not think about it? I don't think about it. Here's the thing. I've been doing this a long time. For many years early in my career, I've been so lucky. I have had readers from the beginning, and then more and more. With each book, I gain more readers, which is wonderful. It's better than if you lose readers. So I've been so fortunate as a literary writer to have the kind of audience and the kind of readership, and to have, like the Oprah Book Club, and to have just the kind of readership I have. I don't take that for granted. I'm very grateful for my readers. But I will tell you that for many years early in my career, I did not get approval from the top. Let's call it that way. The people in New York who decide this is great literature, this is not. The reviewers, the sort of the literary gatekeepers who decide that a book, often, the favored in that kind of arcane world, sometimes the books that are considered like the best literature are books that are very hard for people to read. But for whatever reasons, those, the books are favored by, the people who decide, kind of the club. It felt especially like a guy's club in those days. And for several reasons, I was never going to get that approval, because I'm female, because I'm a rural person. I'm writing about rural things, rural people. Rural writers just didn't get respect for a long time at all, and maybe ever still. And women. Honestly, when I was first writing, there was literature. You go into a bookstore and there's literature shelf, which is John Updike and Norman Mailer and whoever, and then there's women's literature down here, and it's like Alice Walker and Margaret Atwood, and it was like the Kotex section or something. It's like not even, and it was just that blunt that women were second-class writers. And the third thing I had going against me is I've always written books that are very engaged with the world as it is, which is full of inequities, full of sexism and racism and ageism and all kinds of stuff. That's just the world I live in. I don't go looking for issues to write about. I just write about the world I live in, and those are the things that seem interesting to me to write about. And that, for years and years, was viewed with skepticism, again, by those gatekeepers who decided what is high art and what is not. Like interviewers would say, are you allowed to write about things like this? Isn't this political? Which is weird. But I decided not to worry about that because you, the readers, were with me. I decided a long time ago, I'm not writing for prizes. I'm writing for readers. Also, I value literary quality, and I love great literature, and I try really hard to write great literature, but I don't worry who's, if I'm in or out. Also, I didn't go to an MFA program, so I didn't make those connections that you can make that, also kind of get you more approval, whatever. Every field has those clubs, and I was never in the club. But you know what? I was never ever in the club. Growing up, I was not in the club. So I just didn't care. And it's interesting that I've seen a big change over time, that literature that engages with identity politics and sexism and racism and injustice is now in favor, and I could not be happier about that. And novels written by people of color are celebrated as important, Underground Railroad and The Overstory by Richard Powers, and frankly, environmental novel, got an award. So, that I've seen that change, and I think that's a wonderful evolution in our country and in our art, our culture of our art. But Appalachians, not in the club still. I just haven't worried about it.
Is that all right?
On the day that the Pulitzer Prize was announced, and mind you, they don't call you. They just announce. They figure you're listening. Well, I wasn't listening. I was chopping onions in my kitchen. It was dinner time, and all of a sudden, it was in May. A year ago, May. Every phone in the house blew up. All at once. Like my phone was my cell was on the table, my husband's was on the table, our landline, because we don't get a signal at our house, except for the Wi-Fi. So all the phones, all of a sudden, are ringing and ringing, and I picked up my phone, and you know how there's like this stack of texts. It looks like there was a stack of 20 texts from different people, and the one on top said, "I'm crying my eyes out." And I said, "Oh God, Stephen, somebody's dead." And then I answered the landline, and it was my agent, Sam Stoloff, and he said, "Barbara, I can't believe it." And I said, "Can't believe what? Who died?" And he told me, oh, well, you won the Pulitzer Prize. And I don't remember this, but he says that I swore like a sailor, that I just this string of curses came out of my mouth. So that was demon talking, the F-bomb king. So it was so unexpected, which proves to me that no, I wasn't even in any secret part of my psyche holding out thinking I need this approval. It didn't seem like I needed this. But here's the thing. We needed this. For the next 2 weeks, I swear, everywhere I went, to the post office, to the grocery store, to the bakery, everybody I talked to said, "Congratulations, we won." It was like everybody knew about this prize. And my cousins say congratulations, that I never met your cousins, but they say congratulations. And everybody knew about this prize, and everybody felt the truth of the fact that finally, in my writing lifetime, no Appalachian book has ever gotten that kind of respect. So it felt like fireworks going off up and down the mountain. My community, our community, felt this respect, this honor, and I am so happy to accept it for us. And that's an Appalachian thing. You cannot say, I'm proud of myself, but I can say, I'm proud of us, and I'm happy for us. That just makes me carry joy into the next thing that I write. What authors am I reading now? I love it and hate that question because I have always have so many great books that I've just read, and then I go completely blank on stage. I can't remember. What am I reading? I just read The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. I loved The Matrix, also by her. By a local writer, Patricia Hudson, Traces, and it's about the women in Daniel Boone's family. It's about Rebecca and Jemima and Susanna Boone, and it's so good. She lives in Knoxville. So that's an Appalachian novel. And boy, did we need that story, the Daniel Boone story told from the point of view of the wives. And the wife and the daughters were like, geez, he wants to go to Kentucky. It was not an easy life for them. But anyway, I love reading contemporary literature, and I also love rereading classics. There are certain books I love Steinbeck, books that have influenced me enormously. Cannery Row by John Steinbeck. That's the first book I ever read. I probably was 19 when I read Cannery Row, and that's the first time I realized that a book could be about ordinary people, and that it could be amazing. It could be great. I thought, I think that I could write a book like that. So Steinbeck, Doris Lessing has been very, very important in my life. Her books, her early books, the Martha Quest novels set in, it was Rhodesia at that time, and she was the first literature I read that really addressed racism and sexism in this really visceral way. So you really felt the weight of what these attitudes mean in the world. And I thought, again, wow, you can write about that. I like Dickens, obviously. I like Margaret Atwood. How does the rest of the world, what do they think of Demon? I ask myself every time, it seems like every week we sign another contract for the Korean translation, the Turkish translation, the Hebrew translation. And I just think over again, really? Really? They want to read this? And they do. And then come the questions from the translators. Tell me about snake-handling Baptists. Where do I begin to explain that to a French person? And with this book in particular, the voice and the diction, the Appalachian diction. But I feel like all my books are challenging to translate because I love to lean on the specifics of language, and that makes it hard to translate. But amazingly, these very gifted translators who are artists in their own right do wonderful work, and they translate it. And what I found, I literally just a week or two ago came back from this tour of Germany, Poland, and Spain, and once again, and I talked with, they really work you. I've talked to journalists, and I talk to audiences, and what I hear over and over, it's so interesting. When we get down to this talk about the rural-urban divide, they all go, yeah, that's a global phenomenon. And we're seeing in many different countries this problem of rural people feeling overlooked as media and as power has become, centralized in cities. Rural people's needs and cultures and interests are being overlooked, and they're unhappy about it, and they're angry about it, and there are sort of backlash political movements as a consequence that are really hard to understand. Suddenly, what are they so mad about? So it is a global phenomenon, because here's the thing: if everybody follows the great plan and moves to the city so their labor can be monetized, who's going to grow the food? All right? People, we need all of our cultures. We need the beautiful things that are made and grown in every part of the world. And we need respect for differences and to find a way somehow to help unrepresented people feel represented, to feel seen, and to feel honored. So here's where I'm going to wind up with the benediction. You are all readers. I'm assuming that because you're here. And you all, I'm also going to assume, read fiction. And I thank you for that. We live in a world where there's like a glut of information, and we always feel like there's more stuff we need to know about and learn about, and and follow the news and be informed. And sometimes it might feel like reading fiction, reading these made-up stories, is a luxury we can't afford. Well, I'm here to tell you we can't afford not to. Fiction has a magical power. Fiction asks you to put your life aside for a period of, 8 or 10 hours, and go into the brain of somebody else. Inside the brain of somebody else. Think about that. How magical is that? During the time you're reading that book, you stop being you, right? You forget about you. You see a new world through new eyes. That character's problems become your problems. You feel them. This is the way humans really, really get information, is emotionally. That's how we believe truths, is when we feel them. It's just how we're wired. We're animals, but we can be good animals. Doing that thing where you go into another life and you really feel it is removing barriers between yourself and the other. A person who might be from a different background, a different ethnicity, a different gender, from a different country. This thing we call othering, this notion that somebody who's different from me is scary and I don't really want them, around me, that sort of instinct that we have. Fiction dissolves those barriers. The other becomes us. And so when you put that book down and you come back into your own life, you've changed. You've expanded inside. Your capacity for empathy, for the addicted person, for the person struggling with poverty, for whatever that person needed, that has become incorporated into your sense of what is needed in the world. You've increased your capacity for empathy, which is the highest state of grace that humans can find. And that, my friends, I believe will save us. So thank you for reading.
And we'll think back on how we cried, how sometimes it felt like flying, and how we both